Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Anna Robinson, and I'm the West Virginia Program Manager and Communications Coordinator for the One America Movement. Thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of Candid Conversations. For those of you who don't know, Candid Conversations is a part of our new Corona Rebuild initiative, where we connect the challenges of COVID-19, the divisions in our country, and the roles we each have to play in order to move forward together. Every Friday, we'll feature someone from the One America Movement Network to get candid on our show about how division and COVID-19 and how many things are affecting us in our lives today. We've covered issues related to race, food insecurity, health disparities, mental health, and so much more. Joining us today is someone that you guys have met before because he was once a host of Candid Conversations, Ryan Early. He is our Development and Operations Associate. Hey, Ryan, how's it going?
Going great. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Ryan was once a high school teacher who taught digital media literacy. And today, that is what he is here to talk to us about. He's going to give us a little course. We're going to call it Media Literacy 101. So thank you so much for being here, Ryan.
Thank you for having me.
Not a problem, not a problem. So I want to jump right in. What sparked your interest in media? Like, what led you to become a media connoisseur?
Well, I guess connoisseur, more like a media, like a news junkie. But I guess growing up in the era of new cable news, my parents always had CNN on TV. And so they would watch it nonstop. It was never anything like we would watch, obviously, sitcoms and stuff, but the news was central in our household, and they read the newspaper every day. And so, being from New Orleans, especially, local news is like an institution. So, like, local anchors are celebrities, and there's just a culture around news in New Orleans that I grew up with, and we still appreciate to this day. So, I guess from a very young age, that's what I was introduced to and sort of what I loved. And additionally, like I used to watch Jeopardy with my dad, and so as a kid, and so like watching the news helped me answer some of those questions, even as a young kid, even though I was getting most of the questions wrong. But it was formative in my experience for like just consuming media and facts and analyzing things slowly but surely throughout my education. So like over time, I guess in college, I started realizing that there was bias in media, and some of the same stories were being told over and over in different, but like not in different ways from my perspective, but it was very much like, it comes from the NBC affiliate and goes to the Fox affiliate or the CBS affiliate. And I was just like, where's the diversity in these stories? And I realized that there was a danger in a single story. There was always the same story being told, and there was no nuance in these stories. And so I started to sort of consume even more media and look for that nuance, and which sort of got me on the track where I am today and how I dissect and digest the news and trying to find sort of like those little small intricacies between articles, which end up helping me understand the article a little bit more, the news story a little bit more. So.
Right. Definitely. And speaking of like dissecting and really digesting the news and reading it to understand or watching to understand, I know that we've spoken as an organization about how sometimes when we see things, and media can exist in a lot of different places, when we see things, we might not think critically about what we're seeing, and we might tend to believe it immediately. So I'm wondering if you could tell us what is media literacy and how can people use that to better interpret the news?
So yeah, I think so. Media literacy is basically the ability to identify different types of media and sort of understanding the messages that they're trying to send. And that's a very simple definition of it. So like media can include, obviously we talk about news, but it can include like YouTube clips, it can include audio clips, those WhatsApp group messages that are being forwarded to everybody. It could also include memes, and text messages and things like that. So media literacy is being able to understand those forms of media and understand what types of messages are being sent. So like any dog whistles that are being sent by, our leaders and things like that. Anything about, you may see, let's say, for example, the continent of Africa being portrayed as overly poor and abject poverty all the time and disease. So being able to understand what you're being bombarded with each day and what messages they're trying to send to you and have you comprehend is what media literacy is. So just sort of very much like literacy as far as reading and writing and things like that. So it's just how you interpret those forms of media. Yeah.
Right. So for someone who wants to become more media literate,
Mm-hmm.
do you have any advice for how people can spot a reliable news source?
Yeah, so as a teacher, I taught my students there are like 6 points that or 6 questions you should ask yourself when looking at a news source, maybe or media source, maybe on your news feed, on your Twitter timeline, or something like that. So the first question you would ask yourself is, who made this, and is the creator clearly identified? So a lot of the times you might see a news article where there's no byline. I think The Economist is probably the only one that I can think of that doesn't really have a byline, the person who wrote the story, because they write it as a collective. But other news sources from, you know, just junk spam you might see at the bottom of a web page or something like that, they don't clearly have writers identified. So you really don't know who that person is or who those people are that wrote the article. So you don't really know what agenda they have or what the angle is for their story. And you can't see if they're actually being objective or not. So it's who made this, who the source is. It could be the publication itself. If it's not identified, you probably should be a bit skeptical about that. Is it informative? So, I mean, a lot of the times news articles aren't really informative. They could just give you their opinion. You're informed of somebody's opinion, but you're not really informed on the matter at hand. So there was an event that happened in this city, but somebody's just giving you an opinion about what happened rather than the facts. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Um, Similarly, does it rely on facts? Is it quoting somebody who is directly involved with the situation, or is it just getting somebody's opinion about the situation? So that's another thing you should keep in mind. Uh, when was it made? So when was that article written? And is it timely? Is something you should ask yourself. So if it was written 20 years ago, then it probably isn't relevant to what's going on today. And that's not what makes news, or I would say news is something that's been written recently rather than 5, 10 years ago. And the last, and I think one of the most important things, is it objective? So is somebody injecting their own opinion? Is somebody manipulating the statistics? Is somebody manipulating the photo or the video and that's embedded in this article? That's also something you should look at. Who's being pictured and how are they being pictured? That's another thing you should keep in mind. Are the quotes from people all around, are the quotes from people who have direct involvement with the situation or the matter? Or is it something from, random person on the street that just is gonna inject his or her own opinion? So that's something you should keep in mind. Is it objective?
Definitely. And those are some really, really great tips. And I appreciate you sharing that. When you talk about the news being objective, I think that's a really important piece that we should highlight.
Mhm.
When I graduated from the Reed College of Media at WVU, and I remember right before I graduated, the dean of the college sent out this letter to all of us saying how important our future jobs would be. Because, we had journalists in the college, we had PR people, which is what I was,
Mhm.
advertisers. So she sent out this letter saying how important it would be for us to be objective and to report the news as it is and to be unbiased and to just be honest. Because I guess we're seeing now a culture where news, like you said, it's timely. News needs to be timely, but it seems like um, a lot of news outlets are more concerned about being first or being, the first one to break the story rather than um, reporting something that is accurate that people can rely on. And I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that that was something that always existed? Do you think that it's increasing more with social media? What are your thoughts?
So just to reframe your question, so you're saying if is it important to be first all the time, or reporting something first and being?
No, I know that it's not important to be first. It's more important to be accurate. But I'm wondering if, since you've been, as you call yourself, a news junkie for so long, do you think that the culture of the media has changed over the years to be more so about being first rather than being accurate?
I think that depends on the news source. So I think you get, your network broadcasters like ABC, NBC, Fox, and stuff like that. I think they definitely want to be first, but their reputation is on the line. New York Times, Washington Post, and stuff like that. They definitely want their readers to, be alerted first. But I think that if you get it wrong, that also becomes a news story in itself. So I think it's really important to be accurate and not be first. But I think in the age of clicks, and that's where the culture changed, based on like digital media, especially through social media too. I think that by having people, by posting it first or having your story posted first and to get shared as many times, I mean, that those clicks turn into profit, right? And so I think profit has become a major focus of the media landscape. And I think in a way, in an era where a lot of print and physical papers and things like that aren't as profitable for papers and for newspapers, especially in magazines, I think posting that link online is going to get you, more advertisers or whatever, like that, are more revenue from whatever source. So I think the abundance of social media users and the profit that's involved in that, and the I guess the viralness of an article or something boosts your profile. And I think it's another way to boost your brand and things like that. So yeah, I think it definitely has changed. And from when I was a kid, when I guess in the 90s growing up, cable news was relatively new. And so people still relied on those older forms of media, but and being first, I don't think was as important. It was important, but I don't think it was as important. And now it definitely is, because I mean, like I said earlier in the conversation, you get a lot of the same stories. And so you want to be first for that same story so that you can say you broke it. So,
Yeah, yeah. I definitely understand that. Um, with regard to social media, given that our culture is shifting and it is heavily, heavily influenced by social media, by clicks, by viral marketing, how can people navigate through their timelines and continue to be mindful and think critically about the content that they're seeing?
I think that that's something. It's sort of like you got to be very self-aware of yourself, and I think you also need to understand, I think you need to understand how social media works. And so we've all seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix, which I thought brought light, and it informed me a lot. And I thought I knew a lot more about this type of stuff. And it's like the Social Dilemma basically shone light on how the algorithm works and how social media companies want you to keep, I guess, consuming this news and sharing it with others, and how it basically, all this, like, very similar stories are going to pop up a lot of the time in your newsfeed based on who you interact with. And so these social media companies definitely want you to interact with these people often because you're spending more time on the platform, right? And so who wants to spend time on a platform where you're seeing things that you don't really enjoy, or you want, that will make you unhappy, or you won't agree with or like, or something like that? So I think you should be social media users should be very mindful of what's being presented to them, and sort of do like a week's analysis or something and say, all right, I saw 20 articles with this bias in it about immigration. And then sort of people are like, well, why am I so angry at the other side? Because the facts are here. Well, have you read something from the other side? Have you been presented with something from the other side? Have you sought out something from the other side? And I think that's where the self-awareness comes in, and saying that, oh, wow, all right, I'm seeing all these articles from the New York Times, well, let me check out, another, like the Wall Street Journal, for example, which runs a little more conservative, right? So I don't think that you need to go down into the depths of somebody's conservative blog if you're a liberal or progressive, but I think you do need to find a reputable news source that is laying out the issues with a different ideological perspective, I would say. So diversify your news sources. And I think you should have those 6 questions that I presented earlier about the media you see. And so, is it informative? Is it objective? Is it timely? What has been left out? Who's the creator of this? And so I think those questions will also help you understand, I guess, the biases you're seeing within your news feed and the similar articles you're seeing there. So there's like about 7 or so biases that I have identified. And so there's bias in articles through selection and omission, what quotes you're going to add, how you're going to paint the other person, what things you're going to leave out. So let's say, for example, Joe Biden says something about his support for Medicare for all, and then a conservative news outlet might just chop that, just keep, oh, I support Medicare for all, and then but Joe Biden said, but I X, Y, and Z, so that part gets left out. So when you're reading that media, you got to think about, is this a whole quote, or is there a bias there through selection? Where is it placed? So is the most explosive thing placed at the top, and then at the bottom you get to the actual truth and the full quote of what somebody said or did? I think headlines are really catchy. I mean, I'm a headline reader. That's what makes me want to save those Facebook articles for later, right? So is there bias through that headline? And so if you see that, you should just look at it skeptically and be like, all right, I might be getting into something that might be a little less objective than I would want. And I think the goal is to try to be as objective as you can. Additionally, I think photos and captions and camera angles. We know when Hillary Clinton was running for president, she was getting out of a car and she felt ill. That they captured her stumbling and things like that. Liberal outlets didn't do it as much as the conservative ones did to make her look weak. I think statistics is something. In grad school, I took a statistics course, and one of the big things is that you can make statistics do whatever you want. So there's a one of my favorite ones was that, okay, so they said women after the age of 40, the probability of having a child, the probability of not having a child increases by doubles basically. And when you look at the stats, it actually doubles from like 0.5% to 1%, So if you look at things like that, you're like, well, that's, you cherry pick the statistic to make it look dramatic. So I think when you're actually consuming media and analyzing these articles, it's helpful to keep an open mind about, okay, what are the other statistics and how biased could this be seeming? And also source control. Who are you quoting? What officials in the White House are you quoting? What officials in the Senate are you quoting in the House? So I think that's also something that people should be pretty mindful of when they're consuming media, especially the headlines. I think the headlines and the pictures are the ones that grab you the most.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like you mentioned before with social media, they need to post things that are going to be eye-grabbing for people because otherwise they won't get the click.
Mm-hmm.
So that mindfulness is super, super important. But being aware first. A lot of people aren't even aware of what's happening. I think that these conversations are super, super, super important.
Yeah.
My next question for you, can you explain why media literacy is important to the folks who are watching?
Yeah, I think media literacy is important for anybody who can consume media. So that can be a little kid all the way up to somebody in their 90s or, hundreds or something like that. I think it's really important because it involves a strong focus on civic engagement, and it connects people with tools to be able to voice their concerns and have their perspectives be heard. So I think that in terms of the work that we do here at the One America Movement, working on civic engagement is really important for us. And we can't work together and, I guess, progress towards a less divisive nation if my neighbor over here really doesn't have a good grasp on those 6 questions that I presented. He's not really media literate. We can engage in a certain dialogue, I think, if the media that we consume is not, I don't know, on an even keel. You're consuming something that's hyper partisan, and I'm consuming something that's more so objective because I'm more media literate. I think that we can't move forward as far as tax policy or social and economic policy if the news that you're hearing isn't really accurate, and if it's coming from a biased perspective and stats are cherry picked, presenting information that is not 100% complete. So as voters, we can't then make the wisest choices on tax policies, on taxing, rich people, or providing healthcare for people, or providing, reproductive rights for women. So I think that being media literate basically affects you and me and everybody else in the world, actually. So I think it also tamps down on misinformation, which can spread to violence, sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, things like that. So, which are very detrimental to our democracy. And I think that some people will agree that that has definitely affected our democracy in the past few years, and not under this administration, but under past administrations as well.
So basically, super, super important.
Yeah, it controls everything. I mean, when I saw the social dilemma, I was like, well, I'm smart. I know better. I'm not manipulated by this. It really doesn't matter if you're manipulated by it, if you're feeling manipulated, not manipulated by it. It's what others around you, your fellow man, those people who also have the same vote as you do, the same power at the ballot box. Those people who also have access to materials that could kill you or be violent towards you. I mean, we just found out about the governor of Michigan, in the past 24 hours about, the attempt to kidnap her. The media that these people consumed made them, plot an attack, plot a kidnapping, so, and it doesn't matter if you're sitting at home all the way, where I'm at. It's just like, and it's like, oh, that doesn't affect me. Well, it does, and especially if you're a Michigander or something like that, that does affect your leadership in your own state. So I think, and that could cause a crisis of, leadership in your constitution and things like that. So very important.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, as we were just talking about, we do live in a digital world where news and other information is at our fingertips 24/7, which can be great, but as you mentioned, it could also be extremely dangerous. How do you see us moving forward as a nation together through our very tech-centered society? Like, what is your vision for the future?
I have grand visions, and I don't know if they're, actionable in the short term, but in the long term, my vision is to sort of take a lot of the profits away from we marry the profits. Let's think about ABC or NBC or Fox or something like that, or MSNBC. We're marrying corporations and information, and I think information, especially as far as news goes, helps with civic engagement. But when you marry that with profit, it sort of, I think it gets a little muddy, and I think we sort of need a separation of those two things, or we need more voices and more perspectives of stories being told, but at that level. And I don't know how to do that personally. But I think taking the money, the profit away from journalism, I think would be a start. Another thing I think is not to make it so. Personally, I don't think your news should not be it should not be entertaining. I don't think that it's not, Will Smith movie. It's not, your favorite reality show, The Real Housewives or something. I like dry news that is objective, gives me the points. I don't need, the special chyrons or anything like that on the screen. I don't need my reporter, in the middle of a march. It's fine. Just show me a stock photo or something like that, and that'd be great. I think by trying to engage users in all these like thriller movie type, aspects of journalism is sort of the problem. Like I don't want my news to be entertaining. I'd rather be a little bit drier than, like, personally I enjoy the PBS NewsHour, rather than breaking news, blah, blah, I don't think that's how news should be, personally. And I know that came out of like the 9/11 era and it just stuck. So I would like to see that sort of infotainment go away and just give me the direct news and without all that spin and all that stuff. I think also, especially the work that we do here, is that especially at the One America movement, is getting people to have conversations across divides. And I think getting offline and actually meeting people, or maybe having a Zoom conversation during pandemic time like this, is actually more effective than having people just sit down and read facts all day and just consume journalism, objective journalism all day. I think hearing other people's stories and things like that can help supplement or complement what you read in the news and say, oh, well, that wasn't in a news source I have read. And yes, this person who has a different religion from me has added a point to that. And now my understanding is deeper, but I wouldn't have gotten that from the comment section, for example, without actual an interpersonal relationship with someone else. So I think that's my grand vision as well. Get offline and sort of be face to face with people to help bridge divides by adding a personal aspect. I don't think people are ever convinced of anything by being yelled at or berated or reading an objective article. I think it's through talking to people. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a really great point, and I'd have to agree. I think sometimes people don't respond well to facts, especially if those facts don't support what a belief that they've previously held. But I do think that relationships with people can change minds, especially if there are conversations and you're hearing from different people and hearing from people that maybe you wouldn't have spoken to a year or so ago. People who come from outside of your circle. So I 100% agree with you there. And I think that we could all do better when it comes to that, getting to know new people and putting ourselves out there to have those conversations to learn more about the other side.
Yeah, and I feel like, we get a lot of this bias from both sides of the aisle, right? So we get it from the left, we get it from the right as well. And so I think finding a center and challenging yourself and being a little uncomfortable about what you're consuming and what you're hearing from other people is something that I think makes us human. And actually, I don't think being comfortable and living in your little comfort zone gets us anywhere, right? So, if you're liberal, probably read something a bit more to the center or to the right, and if you're conservative, read something more to the center or to the left, and just get a well-rounded view. Because I don't think that either side is doing a good job at getting us together, right? So,
I 100% agree with you. But we are starting to run out of time. Thank you so much, Ryan, for joining us today and teaching us about media literacy. I definitely learned a lot, and I'm sure the viewers did too. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and can't wait till the next time.
Yes, definitely. We will have you on again as either a guest or a host. But before we head out, I want to remind everybody to please check out our website, www.oneamericamovement.org. You can also find us on Facebook at One America Movement, and you can find us on Twitter at One America Movement, like in the social media way where there are no vowels, MVMT. And make sure you guys join us next week for another episode of Candid Conversations featuring the One America Movement Partnerships Manager, Alden Groves. He is going to be talking with us about new beginnings. Also, if you guys get a chance, please check out our new Corona Rebuild initiative. Go to www.coronarebuild.org to learn more. So I hope you guys have a really great long weekend. Make sure that you take the time to learn about Indigenous Peoples Day. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.